Hey everybody, today we're going over this really easy all grain recipe. It's great for the beginner because it only has 2 ingredients and it has a sugar safety net. So just in case we mess things up, we're still going to be able to make some alcohol. So let's get right into it. So I'm really excited about this recipe because over in our Moonshine For Beginners group at MeWe.com, we are having this event called the Monster Mash, and a lot of us are signed up, and we're all going to make this exact recipe on the same weekend. And a lot of us are even going to be doing it on the same day, which is this coming Sunday. We're going to do it in the live stream. That's going to be May 15th, 2022, in case you're watching this video after that date. The live stream is already over. We've already done the Monster Mash. But if you're catching it before then and you want to join us, come on and join us. So what we've got with this recipe is we've got 1.5 pounds of malted barley. We've got 4.5 pounds of cracked corn. We're going to use 6 gallons of water, and that's going to come out to 1 pound of grain per gallon of water. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. We're going to go over the points per pounds per gallon, and we're also going to go over the diastatic power within this recipe. And I'm just going to kind of show you guys the math again, get you accustomed to figuring this stuff out. We're also going to have 6 pounds of sugar on hand. That way, if everything goes wrong and we can't convert our starches into fermentable sugars, we can always throw 6 pounds of sugar in there and we're going to get roughly, 1.042 gravity. So now I'm going to go over the ppg of this recipe. Okay, so the ppg of this recipe goes like this. The ppg of malted barley is 30. The ppg of cracked corn is 32. I got those numbers off of a chart on stillintheclear.com. I have a ppg chart that shows you the ppg of most commonly used grains and sugars. We've got 1.5 pounds of barley, so we multiply 30 times 1.5, we get 45. We're using 4.5 pounds of corn, so we multiply 4.5 by 32, we get 144. We add that together, we've got 189. We're using 6 gallons of water, so now we're going to divide this entire total, 189, by 6. That gives us 31. So our points per pounds per gallon for this recipe is 31. So that means that if all goes well, we should get a specific gravity reading, a starting reading, an original reading, an initial reading of 1.031. So if we go through this math at the beginning of every recipe, then we know what we should get if we did everything right. So that's why we do it. Now, let's go over the diastatic power. To figure out the diastatic power within this recipe, here's how you do it. You take the diastatic power of barley, which is 140, you multiply it by 1.5 because we're using 1.5 pounds of barley, and that gives you 110. You take the diastatic power of corn, which is nothing, and you multiply that by 4.5, which is also nothing. So we get a total diastatic power within this entire recipe of 210. We're using 6 pounds of grain, so we've got to divide 210 by 6, and that gives us 35. 35 degrees Lintner is enough diastatic power to convert all of the starch within this recipe. If you want to know more about that, I have a video on diastatic power that goes into the whys of how this works. Okay, so now let's get into getting this mash done. Okay, I've got my 1.5 pounds of malted barley and I've crushed it. You can also, at most places where you buy malted barley, you can buy it crushed. If not, if you have to buy it whole, you're going to have to crush it. The cracked corn is just as I bought it at the feed store. It's just regular cracked corn. And then I've got some sugar on standby just in case. I've got right at 3 gallons in this 10-gallon pot. And I'm going to get this, I'm going to heat this up to 190 degrees and then I'll come back. Okay, I'm at 190 degrees. It's time to pour in the cracked corn. And I'm going to stir this for at least 45 minutes and maybe longer. Got to get it good and gelatinized. And I'm not going to record that whole process, but I'll come back once it's done. Okay, so I think we can say that this corn is gelatinized, thick and soupy, porridgey, and this is 4.5 pounds of corn in 3 gallons of water. So now we're going to cool this down. We're going to get it to 152, 51 degrees, and we're going to add in our malted barley to start working on those starches and turn them into sugars. Okay, y'all, the temperatures dropped down, actually dropped down to about 150. So I'm going to go ahead and add in this 1.5 pounds of crushed 2-row barley. I'm going to get this stirred in. I'm going to stir it for about 45 minutes. We'll see how it thins out. It's the next day, and I've added in the other 3 gallons of water. So we now have a total of 6 gallons of water, 4.5 pounds of cracked corn, 1.5 pounds 2-row malted barley. So I'm going to take a sample of this and see what we got as far as an initial gravity reading. Remember our target was 31 gravity points when we did our math. So we'll see if we got it. Chances are we didn't, because we used cracked corn, not ground corn, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. Okay, we've taken our sample. The temperature's close to 60, so good enough for the calibration of the hydrometer, and we get 1.023. Now, our target was 1.031, and we didn't make it. 1.031 would mean 100% conversion and efficiency. Excuse me, but we didn't get that. There's 2 reasons for that. Number 1 is we used cracked corn. We're not grinding the corn on this recipe because this shine along that we're doing this weekend is for the beginners. Not everybody has a grain mill yet, and so we're just using straight cracked corn because you can get it from the store and you can use it just like that. So that's one reason the cracked corn doesn't convert to 100%. Also, I got really tired last night. It was really late when I was finishing this, and when it got down to the end and holding the last temperature, I just got tired and I gave up, and I just let it set overnight. So we got what we got. My guess is that had I been able to hold out a little longer and maintain that second temperature target of 150, then we would have got a little bit more. We still wouldn't have got to 1.031. But so at this point, now we have a choice, or you have a choice. If we look at our triple scale hydrometer, there's 3 scales on here, but 2 of them that we're using today. The specific gravity, and then right next to that is the potential alcohol. And what that means, the potential ABV means if fermentation goes perfectly, the amount of the ABV that you can expect out of this mash. And so if we go to the 1.23 and scroll around to the other side where the potential ABV is, it tells us that this mash is going to be about 6% ABV if fermentation goes well. So at this point you have a choice. You can ferment that out, right? You can ferment it out and run it and have 6%. You're going to have probably a pretty high flavor alcohol if you do a single pot still run, and you're probably going to have a really low yield. So you're not going to get a high quantity out of this product. So remember, we've got a sugar safety net. So your choice is run it just like this. I'm going to go ahead and dump this before I knock it over. Dump it back into the wash or the mash. Now, if you want to, you can add 6 pounds of sugar, and you're going to bump that gravity up about 42 points. So instead of it being 23, you can put it at 65, which is a pretty good number. And so, it's your choice, whatever you want to do. I'm just going to run this one just like it is, and I'm going to see what I get with it being as low as it is. So it's your choice, And this Sunday I'm going to do another batch just like this. Now we just have to pitch our yeast, and we're using Red Star dry activated distiller's yeast, or daddy yeast. And you only need, for 6 gallons, a little over a tablespoon. And you can eyeball that if you want, because if you go over, it's not that big a deal. Also, my temperature is below the pitching temperature. It's closer to 60 degrees because I wanted to take that specific gravity reading. But where I am, the days are getting to 90 degrees pretty quickly. And so all I got to do is just wait. The ambient temperature will bring this mash up, and the yeast will activate and start doing their thing. All that's left now is putting this into the fermenter, and I'm just going to, this pot doesn't have a valve on the bottom of it, so I've just got to dip it out. And I'm going to ferment on the grain, so I'm putting grains and everything in here. And that's going to be it. We'll see you guys on the live stream.